Welcome to the Turn One Studio podcast. I'm Eliud Custodio with Turn One Studio, and here we meet with business professionals that we know and admire. Today's guest is Cheri Giglia from Supporting Strategies, North Shore, Long Island. Cheri, welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
It's my pleasure. So I've known you a little while now, and if people ask me what you do, I typically say, well, she handles bookkeeping. But there's a lot more to what your business offers than bookkeeping, isn't there?
That's correct. Yes. So the gist of what we do is it is outsourced bookkeeping, but also accounting and controller services. So we help business owners get accurate, timely financial statements, but also help to understand their profitability and cash flow by doing a lot of different functions for them, such as helping business owners pay their vendor invoices, helping them invoice their customers, helping them collect the money for their services. We also do regular bookkeeping, which I would say is more like recording cash and credit card activity, reconciling the accounts, helping clients process their payroll, and then at the end of the month doing what we call a month-end close process, which creates the financial statements for them to give them better information in order to run their businesses.
Okay, you guys offer quite a lot.
We do.
That's fantastic. So if I were to categorize the type of business that you prefer to work with, are there certain industries that you gravitate towards or size of company that makes sense to work with you?
Sure. Yeah. Any industry, really,
Okay.
where accounting is like industry agnostic. You know, it doesn't have to be one thing or another. We have worked with clients like e-commerce, doctors, lawyers, manufacturers, fashion designers, vertical farming, you name it, you can do it. The bookkeeping, debits and credits are the same.
Okay.
And the formulas for a profit and loss and a balance sheet are always the same. You just have some different nuances depending on which type of industry that you're working for.
Okay. So I guess if you have money in and money going out, like a healthy business,
Yes.
they're a candidate to work with you.
Exactly. And then you asked about, a typical type of client. I would say, we love to work with small and medium-sized companies that are growing. So they have more of a need for our services as they grow. The business owner, say they had a startup and maybe they get up to about $1 million in sales. They really need to concentrate more on growing their business and servicing their customers, opposed to worrying whether the payroll was processed or they invoiced their customers to keep the money coming in.
Right.
So that's where an outsourced bookkeeper would come in. Other reasons why people come to us or why we work with somebody is every business would have a CPA to help them with their taxes. That's something that we don't do. And a lot of times they'll get to their CPA and their CPA says, I can't do your tax return because your books are not up to date. And or they're not clean enough, or there's some other reason.
Right.
So that's another reason why we end up working with people, because we want the CPA to work with the client to help them get their, best situation tax-wise and not worrying about whether the books are appropriately closed. Another reason why people work with us is, unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud out there.
Okay.
And a previous bookkeeper or whoever was handling the books.
How often do you come across that?
Often.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it a surprise to them?
It often is, because
Okay.
I think sometimes it's just a lack of what we call an internal control, is that they've given their bookkeeper their access to their bank account
Okay.
or their credit card, full access.
Too much trust.
Well, you can trust people, but you should always, my company would never take control of somebody's bank account. We would always get what's called a read-only access to somebody's bank account, and we would never transfer money in between one account and the other, or release a wire, or release a payment. So there always should be a process where, somebody puts it into the system, maybe somebody else approves it, and somebody releases it. And my company couldn't release any payments because we're not a signer on your bank account. So how could we do that? And unfortunately, some people do give that access to people, and it results in fraud. But it's not only fraud of cash or checks. It could also be, I've seen theft of payroll, processing too many payrolls. And I've also seen theft of taking all the American Express points.
Oh, okay.
The owner was not happy.
I would imagine. So those all seem like things, if the owner's hiring someone to focus on the books so they could focus on the business, those are things they're not paying attention to.
Yes. So that's not what you want. So you want a healthy set of internal controls between you and your bookkeeper.
Interesting. Do you often find miscategorized expenses when people are DIYing it in their entrepreneurial journey?
All the time.
All the time.
Sometimes people without a bookkeeper will just take the American Express bill and put it in cost of goods sold.
Okay,
It might not necessarily all be a cost that's related to the goods or services that company is providing.
Right.
So, a bookkeeper will go in and categorize it. Well, this was a business meal. This was, telephone bill or whatever it is. But it's very helpful if you do categorize expenses. One of the softwares that we use predominantly is QuickBooks Online.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't have a bookkeeper or somebody else go in, their standard format of your profit and loss is in alphabetical order. That doesn't really tell you very much if you're trying to look at expenses. Well, what are my sales and marketing?
What are the biggest offenders?
What are my cost expenses?
Mm-hmm.
What are my, marketing, things like that. So a professional bookkeeper, outsourced bookkeeper can set it up so that you can then categorize your expenses as they're coming in to, once again, give you better information at the end.
Right. As a business owner, a challenge I run into every so often is whether I could afford something like a hire, for example. It's something that is a bigger expense and one that's going to be persistent. Mm-hmm. One of the ways I've identified that as a challenge is the difference between monthly recurring revenue, or at least money that I could quote unquote count on, versus one-off stuff that is a little less predictable.
Like a project.
So when I'm looking at my affordability as the business scales, that becomes a little less obvious. Mm-hmm. So with what you and your team do you help add clarity to that? Is when you're talking about reformatting these reports and stuff, it helps with situations like that as well?
Yes. So, for example, a business like yours, which you said you have like recurring revenue, and then you might have some projects. Mm-hmm. What we do is we create separate, what we call a general ledger code into the accounting system, and you record the revenue based on what it was. Well, this person pays you $500 per month for social media or whatever it is, but then you built a website, which is a project. So you code that separately. So if you code the information as you're putting it in when you create the sale, then when you run your report at the end of the month and you close it out, then you could see, well, this month I had $10,000 in recurring and $20,000 in projects. Right. So, you could, and then you can look at trends over time.
I was going to say, I guess it averages out over a certain period of time, and that's how you gain some sort of confidence?
Well, I think when we speak with clients at the end of the month, we review their financials with them. We always look at them on trending. So like, what is, we're just in the beginning of June. So we would have looked at like, here's the first 5 months of the year. But then you can compare, say you have a seasonal business, you could compare that to last year. So maybe you always do a lot of stuff in January, and you can compare January versus January is good for recurring business, but March is great for projects. And if you were trying to budget something, you could look at, well, here are my recurring revenue clients, and say you get, X amount in per year from those. And then maybe you could base your decision about, do I hire a new person, to say, looking at all your other costs, what is the excess, do I have, and can I afford that person, opposed to, counting on the project.
Right.
So something like that. But another way that we help clients trying to understand their financials and whether they can afford things, like you said, a new person, hire a new staff, but we also say, well, when you need a new piece of equipment, or you want to, hire a firm to do marketing services for you, do you have the money to do that? We typically do a rolling 13-week cash flow. Okay. And we would plot out, well, this is your salary expense now, this is your rent expense, this is, your costs of sale or whatever it is. And then look at where, do you have the cash to fund your decision?
I have to ask, why 13?
That's a good question. I guess it's a couple of months. I don't know. It's like
It's a quarter in a week,
yes.
right?
I don't know.
Okay, but that's industry standard, I
It
guess.
is. I've been
Okay.
doing it for years, and you stumped me. I don't know.
Well, and I'm glad, just to go back and say, I'm glad that you answered my other question. I didn't want to necessarily get into the weeds on that as much as I wanted to highlight that is a service or a benefit of working with an organization like yours. As a business owner, I don't have to feel so helpless in my ability to understand affordability and how my money's performing, because I could rely on you for that help.
Yes. Well, if you're working with an outsourced bookkeeper, one thing is being consistent. So you're going to be doing your financials on a consistent basis. You're going to be looking at the results typically by the 15th day of the following month. So you can have more real-time information. And, we always want to talk to our clients once a month, because you might be having the question that you just had, can I hire somebody new? And then you could have that conversation based on real numbers.
That makes a lot of sense. When it comes to payroll, what are some of the challenges there that you often see, or some of the common mistakes business owners are making when they don't have professionals giving them a hand with that?
One of the things is first is to classify the employee or not. Sometimes people, and I'm not a lawyer, but will say that they're a contractor versus an employee.
They're a 1099 versus a W-2?
Yes.
Okay.
So, we can handle and record both. But typically, if they're not sure, we do ask them to clarify, appropriately with their employment lawyer, just to make sure you're going to give that person either a W-2 or a 1099 at the end of the year.
Right.
But some issues is just like you have to make sure that you onboard the employee correctly. Do you have all the right tax documents? Is it, basically just making sure the tax documents and the deductions are correct, and saving all the paperwork, just creating an employee file for that person.
Do you provide a portal of sorts for the business owner and or the employee for stuff like that?
Yes, we actually use SharePoint right now.
Great.
And so when we start up with a client, we set up a dedicated directory for our clients.
Most people know how that works.
Yeah,
SharePoint.
so we give them access to upload stuffs, and we save documents there too. So we don't want to be sending a document with Social Security numbers through email.
Right.
So we want to put it there.
Very cool. You also mentioned you assist with billing and collection.
That's
Did I get that correct? All right.
Yeah, invoicing customers, yes.
Invoicing customers. So expand on that. What does that look like for a business owner?
For example, we work with various law firms, and sometimes they have us help them invoice their customers. Some of them are time and materials. Some of them could be like a fixed fee for some sort of work that they're doing for you. So we would work on they typically have a third-party software that would manage the details, like for a lawyer, so maybe something like a Clio. And what we would do is help run the process. We want to do our invoices once a month. We maybe prepare the invoices, and then especially with like a lawyer or a law firm, do you want to charge all your time? Do you want to comp it? Do we need to add into this bill, like they sent to FedEx and they want to get that back reimbursable from the client? So we would work with them and then also make sure that their third-party software would sync appropriately with, say, their accounting software, such as a QuickBooks Online. And then other things that we would do is sometimes we help with collections. So you would look at like what's called an age receivables and see, is it current? Is it 30, 60, or 90 days? And based on what the client likes to do, when do you call and get a reminder that your invoice is past due? And sometimes with collections, no, we don't do legal collections, but with collections, it's more about just reminding, hey, it's 30 days, due. Just call up the accounting department and say, hey, do you have my invoice?
Right.
Just, the squeaky wheel gets paid type thing.
Makes sense. Maybe this is an impossible question. Because I was thinking earlier, people often miscategorize in QuickBooks what an expense is.
Yeah.
Do you often see it to the extent where it requires refiling a tax return? Or do you typically just take it on the chin that you didn't get to take those write-offs and move on?
Okay, so you're talking more about like tax returns. We don't handle tax returns, but typically, That would be a question for a client's CPA. You know, if they've missed like depreciation or something, or sometimes the CPA can file it next year, or change it or make some sort of adjustment. But the categorization, what we do is we make sure the expenses, we review them and are appropriately categorized. We ask questions with the clients to make sure that we got it right. And typically, a CPA, who knows their client well, will know if something's off. If there's like 100,000 in a category that they've never used before, that'll set off alarm bells.
Right. So Supporting Strategies, that's a larger entity, right? Nationwide.
That's correct. Supporting Strategies is a franchise, so I'm actually a franchisee, and so they have their back office and franchisor is located out of the Boston area. And there's many advantages as being part of them. They are my back office in terms of IT support. So when I have clients that have, say, a QuickBooks desktop file that needs to be converted to QuickBooks Online, they do that sort of work for me. Okay. But they also are my support on the IT side in terms of relationships with the various software providers that we have, which helps us get various discounts, but also deeper relationships with our suppliers. So if something does go wrong, if we have issues, we have a support channel to help us work those things out.
Very cool. Very cool. So we get the benefit of working with you locally as a local business as we are, and you have the perks of enterprise.
That is correct. And also with my other fellow franchisees that I know well, if we come across, say, a legal business that's having a particular challenge and they're looking into a piece of technology, I can talk to people within Supporting Strategies, say, has anyone come across this or this piece of software? So we have a breadth and a depth of getting, answers and helping our clients out.
That's huge.
It is.
All right. Most importantly, what do you like to do for fun?
For fun, couple of things. I think right now, as it's getting nicer out, I'm really into the fitness. I love taking out my bike, get my kids, go to Bethpage State Park.
I love Bethpage.
There's like, I never completely finished the trail, but I think we've done at least 10 miles. So we got that far. And if we're, just being outside is one of the things I love. And also I love going to the beach. Now, I'm not the sit in the sun type person, but I love being around the water. And recently I took my kids to a trip to Aruba and just like snorkeling.
Everyone's talking about Aruba lately.
It's a great place.
Everyone says the same thing.
It's one happy island.
I don't know if it's that whatever that law is about when you hear something, then you always hear it all the time. But for some reason, the past 6 months, I know a handful of people that have been going to Aruba and just praise it.
But I would also say there's wonderful beaches here on Long Island. One of my favorite places, I take a day trip every summer with my kids, and I take the ferry from, I think it's Sayville, and you go over to Sailor's Haven in the Sunken Forest.
Never heard.
It's part of Fire Island, but there's no cars there. And it is just a beautiful beach. You feel like you're on a little island somewhere, and there's a walk through the Sunken Forest, which is a national park. And I think the first time we went there, my kids and I ran into deer. It's just like you feel like you're on this total vacation spot and you're just, down the road in Long Island.
Amazing. I am South Shore ignorant. I love the beaches down there, but for some reason I don't go, and I should. I'm going to have to check that one out, especially Fire Island. I probably count on one hand how many times in my life I've been there, which is a shame considering it's right here in our backyard.
You can only get to this place by a boat, and they have like a nice little shop and, somewhere to get a cocktail too if you want one.
Is that the Red Wagon part of Fire Island where everyone just has a little Red Wagon because they can't have cars? And I've seen the shirts.
No, I don't think so. I don't know about that, but it's just basically you could only get there by a boat. So if you're not on the ferry and you don't have a nice yacht of your own, you're not getting there.
And that adds to the seclusion.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else our audience should know about you and your business before we wrap up?
I would just say that when you're working with clients and, I think one of my main passions is to help my clients understand their business better so they can make better decisions. Don't want them worrying about the bookkeeping, but knowing that it's taken care of. The invoices are going out, the collections are happening, my vendors are being paid, and I understand my financials. I think the best part is when a business owner understands their financials and they can make those decisions that will help move their business forward. And it's great to be part of something like that.
Yeah, that's very empowering for the business owner.
Yeah.
Terrific. This was great. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.